me pull up the PowerPoint lecture again, and it's pretty much the same one we had before. I started on last week talking about ancient India, and I think I was up to the point where I was talking about I think the Aryans coming in, Aryan invasions and all that coming in. The Aryans, I told you, had migrated in here, I think from southern Russia is where it is. And would be like around where the Black Sea, Caspian Sea is. And so they came into Pakistan and India, settled there around the Indus River basin in northern India. And they think they came down through the Hindu Kush and the Khyber Pass, which is a 33-mile mountain pass that kind of goes through Pakistan near Afghanistan. That was believed to be their invasion route that came into the region. So-called Aryans. I think I mentioned this before, showing you a map of the Aryan invasion here, where they came out of that area of southern Russia. Some went into Europe, some went into Southwest Asia, and some went into Central Asia, as you can see. They came down the Khyber Pass, you see right here, which is very famous between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and it's considered to be like one of the major trade routes, roads that kind of runs through that area overall. So anyway, now the Aryans came in, and a little bit about a background about the Aryans. Of course, they're referred to as Indo-Aryans is what they're called in India. So this Indo-Aryan culture, which is basically Caucasian, migrated into what is Pakistan, northern India. And the term Aryan is a term that means either, you see up there, either freeborn or noble birth is what it means. They were trying to differentiate themselves from those that were already in India when they came in, and those that were the Aryan peoples. So there's like, they think there was indigenous people already there, like the Indus people, etc. And some people confuse the term Aryan with the Nazi German race theory, that Hitler and the Nazis kind of, made popular later. But it has nothing to do with it, although some of the Germans thought that they were descended somehow from the Aryans. But that's not the same thing that we're talking about. The Aryans they were famous for bringing in their own language system, which was referred to as being called Sanskrit, which Sanskrit, if you know much about it, is one of the oldest Indo-Aryan languages, which is still used today. It became later on the main language of India that would later lead to other types of Indian languages or dialects that's there today, like Indic and all the other versions, maybe Dravidian and so on. And so Sanskrit's important. A lot of their oldest scriptures, especially in Hinduism, were originally written in Sanskrit, and there's a lot of terms I'll use later which are somehow related to the Sanskrit language, more or less. They also brought in the Vedas as well. The Vedas were brought in. The Vedas were these scriptures that the Aryans wrote down over time. They're like Hindu scriptures, religious texts, and these were books that were written about their gods, mythology, all written, of course, like I said, in Sanskrit, more or less. And the Vedas are very important because they're the basis of all their Hindu theology. It's where they get a lot of their, beliefs in their gods, beliefs in the mythological stories about their gods. And so the Vedas are very important. Usually Vedas, usually plural, usually spelled with an S. But I guess if we're talking about one, it's just one Veda, more or less. The word Veda means knowledge in Sanskrit because it was believed to be knowledge that was given to them by the gods, like their gods, Hindu gods. And Only about 4 of them survive in modern times, which they think were written down about, I guess most of them were written about 3 to 4,000 years ago in Sanskrit. You can see there they were mostly written during that period of from about 1500 to 500 BC, which is called often the Vedic age. That's what they usually called it. And because they think that traditionally the Vedas were oral, they were like, basically chanted by the various Hindu priests and then passed down from generation to generation until over like 1,000-year period, they were eventually written down. There were actually 4 Veda that survived. The one that you need to know about the most is the Rig Veda. That's the one, that's the oldest. It's also the longest, having over 10,000 verses in it. So it's one of the longest ones. Also, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda, of course, are the oldest, pretty much ones that survived from ancient times. The Rig Veda, by the way, is one, like it says, it's one of the oldest Indo-Aryan books ever written down. So it's pretty old. It's at least 3,500 years old, maybe at the most. All right, let me get into the background of Hinduism, just some basic theology about it, more or less. Hinduism is an Eastern religion that originated in India a long time ago, goes back thousands of years ago. It's considered one of the oldest religions in the world still today. Majority of Hindus, of course, live in the Republic of India, which is true. About 1.2 billion practice it worldwide. I forget how many practice in India, but I think it's 800 million, maybe, might be it. It does have other names. Sanatana Dharma is usually one of the Eastern names. They sometimes call it in India. And then today they still call it Hinduism, of course, from a more Western name, which evolved from the name of the Indus River. Of course, it's existed in multiple countries. Of course, like I said, Republic of India has the most in. I think India and Nepal, those 2 countries are the 2 countries that have the most majority overall that are considered Hindu. But you can see Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Bhutan, those are all countries that, of course, have Hindus, and also Indonesia, which is more closer to like the Indian Pacific Ocean areas. That they have also a lot of Hindus as well, but they're more majority Muslim instead of Hindu. So, right, let me also talk about the theology of Hinduism. One of the main ideas of Hinduism theologically is the idea of what they call it's called Brahman, which I think is spelled right. Brahman, Brahman. Let me get that right. Brahman, and it's a concept or a theory or a theology idea, and that's kind of like a centerpiece of Hindu theology. And it's this belief that the whole entire universe is like a reality or existence. So I think the old saying they'd say about it was the ultimate reality of the universe is Brahman. So it's this idea that the whole universe is like one, you want to call it a God soul or something like that. You kind of call it that, but everything is like all part of the same reality. Like everything. And that would include anything from like all living things, all gods, all non-living things are all part of the same universe. So it's not like the West where they think there's like a God in heaven or something like that. It's not like that at all. It might be the closest thing they have to a supreme being, more or less. Although it's really not it doesn't seem like a God, to me. So it's not quite like the same thing, but basically all the gods are all part of this existence, this whole universe, if you want to call it that. So yeah, so Brahman is the ultimate reality of all things in the universe, more or less. And there's like a constant cycle of all living things being born and dying and being reborn again which is something that's, of course, a big belief in reincarnation. They also believe that all living things have an eternal soul that keeps reincarnating, etc. That could be from human form all the way down to the smallest animals, even insects may have some kind of eternal soul, more or less. Of course, the other big belief that they have, of course, in Hinduism, which everybody's heard of, is the belief in reincarnation. The fact that these souls, these living things, live their life. You die, but your soul is reborn. It gets reborn into another living thing. So you have this cycle that kind of goes, life and death, where you're born, you live your life, you die, then you get reborn again, and you do this forever, like eternally, possibly. So reincarnation is the idea that your soul gets reborn multiple times in living things. Samsara is just the cycle of reincarnation, the eternal cycle of reincarnation, where your soul is being reincarnated many times, which I said that it could be over, of course, a long period of time that this could happen. They also call samsara the transmigration of the souls, sometimes also as well. Karma and also dharma, those two things right there are just things that can affect reincarnation. Karma is like your actions in your life. The things you do in this life can affect your next life, your future, more or less. And it could be like positive or negative karma, good or bad karma. Good karma could lead to a better life in the future or the next life, or bad karma can reverse, do the opposite, where your next life is horrible. You come back as a lesser living thing, and so on. So karma is sometimes your destiny. I think it's the term they use. Destiny is usually the word that they use when they describe what karma is. Your destiny, your soul's destiny. Dharma is your ethical duty or virtue. These more have to do with like ethical things, moralistic things, right way of living, your whole entire life. So that can also affect reincarnation, how you treat yourself and treat others, and so on. Dharma is something that's heavily seen, or at least I have the idea of dharma is seen a lot in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. I know in Buddhism it's a big thing, because they talk about the dharma wheel and the 8 dharma that Buddhists have to follow if they want to end reincarnation during their lifetime. Moksha is just the belief that one day the soul will stop reincarnating, which who knows how that could be over time. I guess whatever methods that you do in your life, dharma-wise. And the Buddhists later called it nirvana. They have kind of like equivalent to it, more or less. The word moksha means liberation, or liberation of the soul. So these are just basic concepts, I guess, in Hinduism that are around. There are different schools of thought in Hinduism. There's no specific, school, but there's different versions of Hinduism that exists throughout the world. Now let me go ahead and quickly review over the sections we've done so far. Some of these we of course had done in the part 1 lecture. I'll kind of go through that and do that real fast, more or less. So the first question says, what 2 major rivers in ancient India develop around the Indus River and the Ganges River? What mountain ranges north and northwest of India subdivided off from the rest of Asia? You got the Himalayas, and you've got, of course, the Hindu Kush to the northwest. Why is India known as a subcontinent? It's a subdivided section of Asia, which has been subdivided by mountain ranges, like mostly the Hindu Kush and the Himalayas. What present states or nations make up ancient India? Pakistan, India, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. What was the Indus-Ganges plain? What was important about that area in ancient India? Indus-Ganges plain was the area of northern India from the Indus River Basin to the Ganges River Basin, about a 2,000-mile length region. And it's important a long time ago in ancient India because that's where farming started, agriculture. It's also where they had the first civilizations like the Indus people that lived there. Deccan Plateau is a flat plateau region of southern India. It's kind of right in the middle of the peninsula of India. But it's a flat region that's only like maybe at one point a few hundred feet above sea level. What is the monsoon season? How does it affect the climate of India? The monsoon season, of course, is the also called the southwest monsoon. It's a rainy season that happens in India from about July to about September. And it affects their climate because that's when they get most of their moisture. About 80% of precipitation comes in, and it affects their agriculture. What was the first civilization developed in India? Where was it discovered? That was, of course, the Indus Valley civilization, also called Harappan civilization. It was found in Pakistan, or now Pakistan now. And it was mostly discovered in the 19th century, but excavation started around World War I. What cities were discovered, at least by the 1920s? They were found, they were the largest. They had, of course, Harappa, and then you saw the little short video, Mohenjo-Daro. That one's, of course, the most famous. They've done most excavations there the most. What types of innovation or technology were found at the site? You saw in the video, of course, about that too. They had cities that were made of mud brick that were built on a grid system, 30, 40,000 at the most. They had drainage systems, sewage systems. They had also temples constructed as well. Oh, yeah, come on in. What else they had? They also had like a type of language system they had there called Indus script that they had as well, which is undecipherable. They used bronze technology. They also had a granary sites. You saw in the video, they had like baths and wells, or like the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, which is probably the most famous thing that's at the site. Then we talked about what people came in and invaded. I forgot that question. Why did the Indus civilization decline? They believe it was caused by some kind of climate change, which may have been because of the droughts associated with not enough rain from monsoon seasons. Of course, the video talked about the river changing course. If you go back and watch the video at the beginning, they think that was one theory too. And then they got conquered by the Aryan peoples that came in. What culture people invaded India from somewhere in Asia? Of course, that was the Aryan civilization or Indo-Aryan peoples. And these were people from southern Russia that were Caucasian peoples, called usually Indo-Aryans. And they came in and they occupied Pakistan and northern India. And they were called Aryan, which means in Sanskrit either freeborn or noble birth. Yeah, freeborn or noble birth. The Aryans brought in their own language system called Sanskrit, which is a type of Indo-Aryan language. This language is important because it became the basis of all languages in India, minus English. All the early scriptures, like in Hinduism, etc., even Buddhism, are all written in Sanskrit. Also, they brought in religious scriptures, which I told you were called the Vedas. The Vedas were these Hindu scriptures which taught about their gods, the mythology in Hinduism, and so on. What is the oldest Veda scripture to survive from ancient times? It was called the Rig Veda, and it dates back over 3,000 years ago. It's also the longest of the four that survived. What was the Khyber Pass? I think I was kind of out of order, but the Khyber Pass was a main mountain pass, about 33 miles long. That's in the Hindu Kush. It's like an invasion route and trade route that a lot of people have used to get into India. It's also a road system that runs through there too as well. What main religion of India was influenced by the Aryans? Hinduism, which is often called by the original name. It's called Sanatana Dharma. And it's mostly practiced in southern Asia. What areas of Asia is it mostly dominant as a religion? Republic of India has a majority, about 800 million. Nepal is also majority Hindu as well. But it's also in Pakistan a little bit, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and also in Indonesia. But Hinduism is, I think, got 1.2 million people practice it. It's the fourth largest religion in the world. Actually, not fourth, it's third. I got that wrong. It's the third largest religion in the world because first largest is Christianity, second is Islam, and then third is Hinduism. I'll get that right in the order. Fourth, I think, is Buddhism. That's what it is. What is Brahman? Brahman is the theological idea that the whole universe is like one soul, I guess, or one's like God's soul, or one reality, I guess might be the better word to use. So the belief is that the whole universe is made up of like the same reality, where everything is part of this Brahman, whether it be gods, whether it be all living things, whether it be all non-living things. Like the whole planet is part of Brahman, etc. So it's like the ultimate ground of all being in the universe, I think, is the common thing they'll say about Brahman, about what it is. So it's kind of like a supreme being, but it's not really. I think the West kind of views it as that. What is Atman? Atman is the idea that all living things have souls, eternal souls that reincarnate. What is reincarnation? What is samsara? Reincarnation is the belief that souls are reborn. They live a cycle of life and death, where basically you're born, you live your life, you die, and then what happens is you get reborn again, and you live your life again. And you do this cycle over and over and over again. So it's a belief that all souls go through a cycle of being reborn again. Samsara is just the eternal cycle of reincarnation, which could go forever, like for thousands of years, where you're reincarnating. What are some things that can affect reincarnation? I told you that karma is one, like your actions in life could affect it. And also dharma, your virtues, moralistic way of life, following, certain paths of morality and so on. In Buddhism, it's a big thing, the 8 dharma, which I'll talk about later. Right, let me move on next. I need to talk about also the caste system as well. In Hinduism, the caste system is something else, of course, that's been around forever in Hinduism. It's kind of like a social class system, but it's mostly among the Hindus, predominantly in India or around India. They think it was originally developed by the Aryans, Indo-Aryans that came into India like 4,000 years ago. And in India, they still call it another name, which is Varna or Varna system, and it means color, because they believe at one point when the system started in India, it began mostly because of the fact that the Aryans were trying to differentiate themselves from the indigenous people that are already there. So it was kind of based on race, ethnicity, or even they think color of skin, because the Aryans were lighter skinned and then the indigenous people were darker skinned. So they were kind of trying to differentiate themselves from the people that were there already. So more or less, I think what happened was the upper classes became more like the lighter skinned people and the darker skin became the lower classes. It's kind of familiar in this country, isn't it? If you know that. And for a long time. The British and Portuguese, of course, had different names. They called it caste system, which is it's different origins of where this came from. The word the word caste, is the origin of where the British get it from, which the word caste is Latin for pure. And then they think the Portuguese had something similar. They call it casta with an A, which is, I think, really means lineage, which has more to do with like who you're related to in the social class system. And the British themselves viewed the upper castes as being more pure and the lower ones being less pure, like it says there. And so hence the name sometimes being used, caste. But like the Spanish, I know in Portuguese, I think even did this like in Latin America, where they divided people based on social classes, on really going back to ethnicity, race. Beyond if you heard about the system of the castes that the Spanish had, but it's kind of comparable to that a little bit. These are the four main castes you see on there on the screen. And of course, you got the top one, which is the most purest one, they believe, was ones that were called the Brahmin. The Brahmin were, of course, priests, basically the priestly class overall. Below them were the Kshatriya, which is the ruling class or caste, which might be nobility. It might be the kings, which were called Rajas. I think a lot of the military and so on were kind of in that one also as well. So the first two you're looking at, Brahmin, Kshatriya, that was basically your upper classes. So they had like two of them really. Vaishya was like your middle class. These would be like artisans, that people that work with their hands, like skilled type workers, merchants that own businesses, landowners that own the land, farmland, and so on. And then Shudra, the Shudra, of course, they talk about that as well. And the Shudra, of course, are on the bottom. They're the lower class, which would be like your peasants and so on. They're your manual laborers. They don't own land, so they would be like unskilled type workers and stuff like that. Then there's one more they have too, which is the outcasts, which you may have heard of. These are Hindus in India, even today in modern India, that have been ostracized. And they are often later given a nickname, which they were called untouchables. And they're called this because of the fact that they were kind of seen as being so impure that if you were to, I guess, touch them or whatever, you would become like them. And so these kind of people would be, employed as like street cleaners. They cleaned out the sewers. They did like stuff that was just, horrible stuff that nobody wanted to do. And one group of people that's usually considered mostly a type of outcasts in India today is the so-called Dalit people, which you may have heard of. The Dalit people are believed to be some kind of indigenous people of India that have been there for a long time, like for years. And they are ostracized. And I forget how many people are in it, but it's like a couple hundred. How many was it in it? Some ridiculous amount, like maybe a few 100,000 that might be in it that are kind of considered Dalit. So it's interesting about that. But since the time of Gandhi, like around World War II, the Republic of India has tried to ban it, the caste system, but it's still prevalent today in a lot of parts of India, especially in the rural areas of India. It's still around and still used today. Right. Let me also talk about the gods of Hinduism as well. In Hinduism, there was believed to be a lot of gods, like I think thousands, if I'm not mistaken. And the three main gods that they always talk about is often referred to as being the Trimurti, which means in Sanskrit, the three forms, which are believed to be the three forms of Brahman in the universe. It's believed that the main gods that are associated with Brahman in the universe did three things. They created everything, they preserved everything or maintained everything, and then they destroyed everything. They ended life and so on. So the three chief gods that they always talk about, which are important, is Brahma, the creator, which you see on the screen there. Brahma, of course, is considered to be the supreme god in Hinduism that creates like everything, creates all life, creates all knowledge in general. He's often associated with the Vedas. I think it's believed that that god gave the Hindus the Vedas, and even their language, Sanskrit, was believed to have been given to them. Usually you'll see him in the image of four heads, which the four heads often represent like I think it represents different things. I know maybe the four castes I know. There was something else that represented too, which I can't remember. for some reason. Yeah, those are the four castes. It's the main thing it represents, more or less. I'll get to it later, but he also has a wife, which is the goddess Saraswati, who's like a consort of his overall. Brahma's not very popular though in modern India anymore. So it has very few temples that are actually towards him. Then they have Vishnu as well. Vishnu, put back up on the screen. Vishnu, of course, is considered to be one of the greatest gods in Hinduism. A very popular god. In fact, he's the #1 popular male god in Hinduism. Very popular, especially in northern India. I don't know about the bird god Garuda. Each of these gods have like a vehicle they fly around on. Like I think it's Hamsa is the swan god that Brahma rides around on. Vishnu rides around on Garuda, which is like a falcon type bird god. And then I think they have also Shiva rides on Hamsa, which is a bull god in Hinduism. But he's also got a wife or consort named Lakshmi, which I'll talk about later. And he's very, very popular because he's this god that preserves or maintains the universe. So I think that's chiefly why it's a popular god. There's also different forms of Vishnu, where Vishnu has come down to earth as what they call an incarnation or avatar, where you've had a living god visit the earth as in human form. And the god Krishna and also the god Rama are incarnation versions of Vishnu that are also popular as well. And then, of course, they have also Shiva or Siva, they call him as well. And the destroyer god, the third one there, the three main supreme gods in Hinduism. And he's the one who destroys everything, ends life, associated with death and reincarnation. So Siva is very popular too. He's the second most popular male god behind Vishnu. I told you about Nandi, the bull god. That's his vehicle that he rides around on. I guess that's part of why Hindus don't eat meat. It's because of that. Yeah, his hair sometimes the flowing Ganges River, maybe because a lot of people will go and actually bathe in the Ganges River. It's kind of a pilgrimage that they'll do because it's associated with the Hindu gods. He's got a wife or consort too, which is Kali, but they have another one they'll talk about more. It's more important, probably named Shakti, that's actually more popular. Then you have the supreme goddesses too as well. Saraswati, you see there. She, of course, is the supreme goddess, mostly associated with primarily knowledge. That's her big thing, which knowledge could be anything from, the arts, math, science, music, whatever, basically. It's often associated with stringed instruments and music, which you can see her holding what is kind of like a sitar, basically. And you can see in front of her a Veda book. I'm not sure which one it is. Maybe it's the Rig Veda, one of the oldest ones. But you'll notice that the swastika on the cover of it, that has nothing to do with the Nazis. The swastika was an Indian symbol that's been around since ancient times. And it's a symbol of peace, prosperity, harmony, luck, fortune, things like that. It's actually a good luck symbol. And it's later put on like temples, Hindu temples, even Buddhist temples. It shows up. And what happened in modern times is it was perverted by Hitler and the Nazis. Although they think the swastika symbol didn't come from India. It came from a Catholic church that Hitler saw something like a symbol or something like that. There's Saraswati. So she basically is married to Lord Brahma, basically. Now they have also another goddess, which is Lakshmi as well. Lakshmi, of course, is another of the supreme goddesses in Hinduism. Well, she's associated with a bunch of things. Wealth, prosperity, I think, are the primary things that she's usually associated with. And that's her with 4 arms and the lotus plant. And she does have a brother as well, mentioned briefly in the background there. You can see behind her. His name is Ganesha. He's a male god in Hinduism, and he's mostly associated with elephant gods because elephants were very important in ancient times because they were used as pachyderms. They were also used in warfare, like as cavalry. And Ganesh is also a god of fortune and wealth, you can see. And for some reason, he's also a god associated with the patron, with the arts and culture and things like that. So Ganesh is real popular. I think Vishnu, Siva, and Ganesha, those 3 in order, is in popularity of the male gods. One more goddess I'll talk about real quick is they have also Shakti, who they also call Kali. Usually Shakti is more well known. And she is considered to be, they think, the wife and consort of Shiva in Hindu mythology. She's associated with all kinds of things. Death, destruction, time, power, etc. There's different images of her, but usually she's in the form of a woman with either 4 arms or 8 arms. Usually Shakti has 4 arms. Each symbol usually symbolizes something to do with that particular god, more or less. So the Hindus had all kinds of gods. They think they may have had like hundreds of thousands of them at one point, but over time they've narrowed them down and all that. All right, let me get to next the rise of Buddhism. I need to talk about that next and get into Buddha, because Buddhism is something else that was also part of Hinduism as well. There, of course, is Buddha there, who they call the Enlightened One. And Buddhism started about 2,500 years ago, close to about 500 BC. Started by this man named Siddhartha Gautama, who was basically, he was an Indian prince who became a monk and also a teacher in India. And his followers called him the Buddha, which meant, in Sanskrit, it meant the Enlightened One. They think Buddha was a wealthy prince who was going to be a king somewhere in northern India, but he gave up all that to basically develop his own philosophical religious system, which would later be named after him, of course, called Buddhism. And Buddha, they believe, was trying to challenge a lot of the Hindu traditions at the time, that you couldn't stop reincarnation, that you just, it would go on forever for a long time before moksha would happen, I guess. And so what Buddha was trying to do was he was trying to find some kind of shortcut or way to end the cycle of reincarnation, or what we call samsara, and to try to do it in one lifetime. So that's one of the main goals that the Buddhists are trying to do. They're trying to find a shortcut to end reincarnation, basically. So what Buddha taught, if you know about this, he sought eventually, from trial and error, he sought this so-called path of moderation, where it would be like based on a key way of right living, like live your life a certain way. He believed that would be one way to reach enlightenment, to obtain nirvana, which would be, nirvana, remember again, was the Buddhist version of moksha, where you would end reincarnation. And it's called all kinds of names, what he's talking about, the path of moderation. It's called sometimes the middle path, the central path, the middle way, the central way. It's also called the Eightfold Path, is another name that they also call it. So it's called all kinds of names, the path of moderation that Buddha sought. And Buddha was trying to basically lead a basic life between 2 extremes, one of self-indulgence and one of self-mortification, where self-indulgence would be where you wanted to have all material things, all power and money, and so on, all food. And then self-mortification would be the opposite, where you would want hardly anything, live a life of an impoverished person, don't eat anything, extreme fasting. So he believed that the key to it was somewhere in the middle, between those 2 extremes. Over time, Buddha taught some teachings that his students later passed down, which was called the Four Noble Truths. These are a set of 4 teachings of Buddha that do several things. One, it basically teaches you what causes reincarnation, and then it also teaches you how to stop the cycle of samsara, so to end reincarnation, basically. Let me quickly go through the 4 noble truths and get through that real quick. The 4 noble truths, I'll kind of put it in Sanskrit for you. The first one is 4 noble truths. The first one is called dukkha, which means suffering. That has to do with the belief that the reason why people are being reincarnated is because their soul is suffering. So that's the first thing, first noble truth. Second noble truth, Sanskrit, is samudaya. That one is, of course, translates as either craving or desire. Second noble truth is the belief that what's causing people to be reincarnated is the fact that people are basically trying to get material things their whole life, like desire or craving power, money, food, whatever. And it's only leading to being reincarnated again. 3, nirodha, cessation or attachment. Actually means cessation, I think is what the word means. It's a cessation of attachment to desires. Like basically, your whole life isn't about trying to get material things and so on. In that, you should basically seek that, like I said, that middle path, that middle way to right living, so that you overcome that and you become more happier. Because Buddha believes that people will be more happier if their whole life isn't about obtaining these material things, obsessing over them, and so on. And the fourth one, called sometimes Magga, is the Eightfold Path or the Middle Central Path. This one is basically 8 dharma that one must follow to attain nirvana. And it's represented, of course, on the Dharma wheel or Dharma Chakra, which is like a 8-spoked wheel where each dharma is, of course, on the actual wheel. And I do have a list of them, the 8 dharma that Buddhists have to follow to basically obtain enlightenment in nirvana. As a Buddhist, you have to have the right view, the right intention, the right speech, the right action, the right livelihood, the right effort, the right mindfulness, and the right concentration. So all these are examples of right ways of living, I guess you could say. That was the middle path or middle way. It's called all kinds of names. The Noble Eightfold Path or Fourth Noble Truth, that's another name too. They call it basically. So basically the idea is that if you do all this, what's going to happen is your soul won't reincarnate again. And you'll become one with Brahman and all that in the universe. Buddhism itself eventually spread to the East, though. It's a type of philosophical religious system that was not very popular in South Asia. So you can see it spread to other parts of East Asia, more or less, going into Mongolia, China, Tibet, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Korea, Japan. So all those are areas, of course, it went into, and majority of people that are Buddhists are in China, Tibet, in those areas that you're looking at right there in the middle. And there's different types of Buddhism too, at least 3 different schools of thought. I wouldn't worry about that, but basically those are the 3 types that do exist you see in that map. All right, let me talk about for a few minutes too. They also have as well another similar type of philosophical religious system called Jainism. They had as well. I guess I'll go ahead and talk about it since I got time. And the Jainism is a type of Eastern religion that broke away from also Hinduism as well. It was founded by this man named Mahavira, And Mahavira was like this monk who became was originally a prince, like Buddha was. And he decided to break away, form a similar religion that was trying to also test the whole, Hindu theology. And they believed that they could also end reincarnation or samsara, but Jainism concentrated more on the self-mortification aspect of it. So the more extreme aspect that I talked about, like, extreme fasting and things like that. And the term Jain means in Sanskrit, it meant desires, as in to conquer one's desires. So they were trying to eliminate their material things, just get rid of them, like all of them. And so most Jains would live an extreme life, where extreme poverty, very little clothes they would wear. They would get rid of material things. They would use extreme fasting. So it's a method that's, something that they did that was different from Buddhism. It's kind of similar, but they went more to an extreme version of that. And it's still practiced today in parts of Asia. About 5 million people, 5 to 6 million people still practice it, believe it or not. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about it. It's not very popular and it's not that famous, compared to Buddhism, which might be like the fourth largest religious philosophical system in the world. All right, let me go on. I got a few minutes left. Let me go ahead and I'll talk about also the Mauryan Empire that came in. What was that? The Mauryan Empire was an Indian empire that developed in the 4th century, and it would last until about the 2nd century BC. It was around for about close to 150 years, roughly. And if you know much about it, it was the first empire to unify the Indian subcontinent into like one big state. India before that was made up of multiple states ruled by kings or princes that were called Rajas, like I told you. And then the rulers of these eventually become like an emperor, or just like a Maharaja, probably really. It was believed to have started at the end of the 4th century. They think it was influenced by the rise of Alexander the Great, who conquered the Persian Empire. And then what happened was around 323, his empire collapsed because Alexander died young at the age of 32. And so they had this king that emerged named Chandragupta Maurya. He founded the state about 322 BC in what is the Ganges River Basin. He went on to become their first king, and he also founded the dynasty, which was named after the empire, Mauryan Empire, same thing, Maurya dynasty. And it was based in the Ganges River Basin. And over time, Chandragupta formed a capital there along that river that was called Pataliputra. And this became one of the first major capitals of ancient India, which it will be for many years. In fact, other states later use it as their capital as well. It's located in eastern India near the modern city of Patna, along the Ganges River Basin. So like I said, the empire was based around the Ganges River Basin. Bindusara was another one that was a ruler, another king of the Maurya Empire as well. He was the second king. It's not much known about him, but he reigned, they believe, in the early part of the 3rd century BC. They do think he was one of these rulers that converted to Jainism, because there were a few rulers that practiced that religion, but not that many. Shaka the Great, of course, considered one of the greatest rulers of the Mauryan Empire, and also in ancient India a long time ago. And he was the 3rd Mauryan ruler. He reigned about the mid part of the 3rd century BC. You can see he reigned over 30 years. And basically, he was the peak ruler of the empire. If you look at this map here, the Mauryan Empire peaked in size, ranging from Pakistan all the way down into Pakistan and actually Afghanistan over here, all the way down into southern India, And they also controlled part of where Bangladesh is today. So it was a massive empire that he amassed. He and his, grandfather did. And after his death, the empire began to decline. So it wasn't as powerful afterwards. Shaka was famous for converting to Buddhism during his reign. He had, I think, originally been I think he may have been a Hindu, I believe, but he later converted. And he went on to become a big patron of Buddhism. He built a bunch of shrines and temples to Buddha throughout the empire. And then the other thing he did that's very famous, of course, is that Ashoka was the one that spread Buddhism. He's the one that spread it outside of India. And so under him, they started pushing it into parts of East Asia, Northern Asia. I think they even tried to spread it to the West, Southwest Asia, but it didn't take off that way. After he died, the empire kind of fell apart. And then what happened was by the early part of the 2nd century BC, the Mauryan Empire broke up due to civil war. And India itself did not reunite again as one empire until the golden age of the Guptas, which was around the 4th century CE or AD. And this was another Indian empire called the Gupta Empire, which later lasted about a couple centuries from the 4th to about the 6th centuries AD. But that's pretty much, that period is kind of considered like the peak of the golden age of ancient India, like a long time ago. So today, India is, of course, broken up. It's now made up of multiple states, but the ideas, like the religious ideas, are still there. Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and then the caste system is even still around too, although they're trying to get rid of it, more or less. All right, so that's about it for lecture-wise. Let me go ahead. I got a few minutes left. I can go ahead and review real quick for you about India. What is the caste system? What is the Hindu name for it? The caste system was a social system of India that was developed by the Aryans, and it was also called the Varna system as well. The 4 main castes were the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and of course the Sudra. The Brahmin were priests. The Kshatriya was like the ruling caste. The Vaishya was like a middle class, merchants, artisans, etc. And then the Sudra was like the peasant class. On the bottom, they have the outcasts, which were people that were kicked out of the caste. And these were people that were later called the untouchables, which is what their nickname was. And the Dalit people were, remember, they were some of the examples of those that are kind of considered outcasts. 3 principal male gods, of course, I told you, were Brahma, the creator, Shiva, Vishnu, the preserver, and Siva, the destroyer. The 3 main supreme gods I told you about, the 3 supreme goddesses, that I told you about were, they first had, what was their names here real quick? I'm trying to remember what they were, the gods. They were up here real quick, but they had, not Lakshmi first. The other one was Saraswati, supreme goddess of knowledge, Lakshmi, supreme goddess of wealth, prosperity. And then, of course, they had also really Shakti, the one that associated with destruction, power, time, etc., death, change, things like that. Ganesha was also the elephant god, the one associated with like patron of the arts, wealth, prosperity, and also fortune as well. Hard to remember all this. Who was the founder of Buddhism? Buddha, of course, who was called Siddhartha Gautama. That was his original name. What was the main goal of Buddhism? The main goal of Buddhism was to try to find some kind of shortcut or way or path to end reincarnation within one lifetime. How did Buddha reach enlightenment? He lived what they call the middle path or middle way of right living, which was between two extremes, which I told you were self-mortification and also self-mortification and also indulgence was the other one. The main teachings of Buddha was called the Four Noble Truths. The nickname for the fourth noble truth, there's a lot of nicknames for it. Middle path, middle way, central path, whatever you want to call it. They also call it the Noble Eightfold Path as well, or Fourth Noble Truth. It includes 8 Dharma on that Dharma wheel or Dharma Chakra wheel, which Buddhists must follow if they want to end reincarnation. What empire emerged in India after the collapse of Alexander the Great's empire? Of course, I just talked about that. The Maurya Empire. Its founder was Chandragupta Maurya, who founded it, they think, right after Alexander's empire collapsed in the east. The dynasty was also named after the empire in the family name, the Maurya dynasty, or Mauryan, if you want to call it that way. The empire was based along the Ganges River basin. They had a capital called Pataliputra, which is also called Patna, where the ruins of it is. It's in eastern India. Who was the greatest ruler of the Mauryans, the grandson of the founder? That was, of course, Shaka or Shaka the Great. And he was considered their peak ruler who reigned in the, I think it was in the, what century was that? 3rd century, I believe it was. Yeah, the 3rd century BC, of course. And then what was he famous for as a ruler? He was known for, of course, being a Buddhist ruler of India. And then he was also famous for being like a patron to Buddhism, spreading the religion to the East and Asia as well. So anyway, that's enough about ancient India. Pretty much later I'm going to have a some kind of Canvas quiz coming up on that. I don't think that's going to show up on your second exam. I'm kind of not going to have that more or less. So there's going to be like a major quiz on that coming up, which that probably won't be until I want to say maybe next week. Kind of let this week kind of go through a little bit, and I'll give it to you probably next week sometime because you've got all these other assignments you've got to do right now. Like there's the one on ancient Mesopotamia Canvas quiz. You need to work on that one. You need to work on the video quiz on Egypt. And then, of course, you've got the vocab due this week. So just try to start turning that in this week. I won't take off points for if you don't do it today, but that needs to be turned in throughout the whole week, more or less. And later you'll also start hopefully working on the first exam, which I will have that up till early November for you to finish. So you got a while on that to kind of get to that because you got those other assignments right now you need to do now. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, let me know later. If it's about the lecture, you can just, if you got a question about the lecture, let me know. You can send me comments, questions through my YouTube channel because I'm going to post it after I finish this stream here. Also, like if you're like joining Facebook or you want to come in for the Facebook, or you want to go into Facebook Live and look at my lectures, make sure you send me a friend request to add me to my Facebook page so I can let you look at it because I've switched to privacy, if you don't mind, because of privacy issues. So anyway, but I will of course have another lecture later this week. Well, hopefully we'll have another lecture this week. I don't know. We have to watch the weather. We got this hurricane out there that might be coming. So we're going to have to see if we have classes or not for Wednesday. But I'll probably have some kind of written lecture coming up on China because I'm not planning to lecture on China. I'm going to give you a written lecture, which will go toward the second exam. And I'm probably going to move on to talk about ancient Greece. So that's it for this lecture. And y'all take